Happy Tuesday. It is Tuesday, April 27th, 2021. Welcome to another edition of Tuesday with Thom. Tuesday with Thom, of course, is brought to you by our partners, the Best Girl Consulting Firm. Best Girl customizes solutions to issues of leadership, access and inclusion, economic development, and communication. Best Girl creates the solutions that fit your needs. Okay, our roundtable regulars. I was going to say Barbara Wallace Edwards and Mychal Walker are here today, but Barbara Wallace Edwards is not here yet. She had some internet problems this morning, and so we're hoping that she will join us shortly. We always look forward to our conversations with the both of them. Let's see. Last week, we took a look inside Hollywood from a performer and crew viewpoint with Mr. Stefan Demings, a hairstylist to many stars, and our guest. It was a fun show with lots of laughter. Stefan and I have worked on several shows together and always enjoy looking back over the many funny and excitable things that have happened to us throughout the years. This week's show is about Hollywood as well, but from a different perspective. Today's show is through the eyes of a person who the story is not only written about, but our guest is actually the man who wrote the story. Our guest today is Bob Zellner. If you have not seen the movie Son of the South, please do so. The film is based on the book, The Wrong Side of Murder Creek. The man who wrote that book and on whose life the film is based is here with us today, Mr. Bob Zellner. Zellner's memoir, The Wrong Side of Murder Creek, A White Southerner in the Freedom Movement, was recently produced by Spike Lee and directed by Barry Brown into a major motion picture. Son of the South, we look forward to having Mr. Zellner on today. Also, if you're interested in seeing him live, you can do that on Wednesday, April the 28th at 3 o'clock. Mr. Zellner will speak about his experience in the civil rights movement and host a discussion at the McQueen Alumni Center at the University of South Alabama. Okay, I don't think Barbara is here yet, but we're going to move on to our regular roundtable guest and introduce. Barbara's not here, I assume, so we're going to introduce Mychal. Well, I'll introduce Barbara. I'll introduce Mychal Walker. Mychal Walker, of course, you all know, is the president of the Walker Agency, a full-service insurance brokerage. And Mychal, let me introduce Barbara. Stay right there. Don't go anywhere. Let me just say, Barbara, you guys know Barbara. She will be here shortly, and she's having some internet issues. Barbara Wallace Edwards, a Mobile, Alabama native, currently living in Birmingham. And now back to Mychal Walker. Mychal, how are you this morning?
Doing well, Thom. Good morning to you, and I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing great, man. It's a beautiful day. It's finally a beautiful day. We've been having so many storms, and it's nice not to have a storm. What's going on in your world, Mychal?
Well, Thom, as always, I try and bring news that's relatable in regards to healthcare. And there's a letter that's been sent to President Biden and Vice President Harris from House Democrats. And it's basically urging them to make Medicare-related issues a part of the economic relief plan. And in that letter, what they're asking is to make Medicare eligibility from 65 to 55. As you know, you turn 65, you're eligible for Medicare. Well, they want them to lower that eligibility age down to 55. And the reason being is that there are several things. They want to include vision, dental, and hearing, and the out-of-pocket cap on expenses. And also, one major component of that is that they want to remove the restrictions that does not allow Medicare to negotiate with pharmacy companies. One of the reasons being is that a study by the Congressional Budget Office has determined that if Medicare were allowed to negotiate with Big Pharma, they could save up to $450 billion over the next decade and increase their revenues by $45 billion. The U.S. pays a lot more for drugs than any other country. In addition to that, the studies have found that people are putting off waiting until they turn age 65 to do diagnostic testing and screening that could prevent cancer. So they want to try to expand that and cut down on the back end costs of Medicare. And they've also determined that poor oral health, vision loss, hearing impairment have all been linked to diabetes, cardiovascular, depression, and dementia.
Well, let me ask, who sent this? You said they sent this letter. Who's that? Who's the
I
they?
said House Democrats. Some of the people that were on the letter assigned on was Representative Pramila Jayapal out of Washington, Jared Golden from Maine, Joe Nuggies from Colorado, and Corner Lamb from Pennsylvania. They were among the people that sent the letter over.
Is there, I imagine there's not been a response yet, huh?
Well, there has not been, but it's gaining a lot of steam. I think the next place they'll go to will be the Senate, because this came from the House. So they're trying to get some buy-in from the Senate to join in on this. As you know, not long ago, I talked about the move to expand Medicare for all and make it Medicare for all, which would do away with private health insurance whatsoever. And everybody, regardless of their age, would be on Medicare. And however, there's not a lot of enthusiasm regarding that because they know that that would certainly change the face of Medicare as we know it of today. And President Biden has been on record saying he does not want to get rid of private health insurance. He was more in favor of some type of combination, maybe expanding Medicare, but also keep private health care there. All of this is moving towards what they call universal health care or a single payer. That's where a lot of people on the Democratic side of the aisle want to go to. However, that would be a very expensive proposition. I would think that if they were to lower the eligibility age for those getting on Medicare, that could certainly help with providing more care to people, because people tend to get into a gap when they're getting close to retirement age. Sometimes companies will offer them early retirement and then say, well, we'll give you X amount of dollars, go find your own health care. Some of them just give them 30, 60 days to go find their own health care. And if they're not at Medicare age, they're caught where they have to go on COBRA, which is 2 to 3 times more expensive than what they were paying when they had group. So if they were to expand this and lower the age eligibility, that would capture those people that are like in that 55, 50, 55 age bracket that are waiting till they turn 65.
If being in the insurance business, and I think we've talked about this, but how do you feel about it, and what do you think is the? I mean, I can tell you what I think, but you know much more about it than I do. What do you think are the possibilities? We're in this situation now politically where the Democrats want it, the Republicans are not going to want it, and vice versa when the Republicans were in charge of the House and the Senate. So politically, is it even possible to do some of those things? And I probably feel like it's a better alternative, but let me hear from somebody who knows. I don't know.
Yes, it is possible to do that. It's certainly possible to lower the age of eligibility from 65. There's been some discussions that maybe we should go in a phase approach, like instead of going from 65 to 55 or 60, go down to 62. After all, age 62 is the first age that you're able to apply for Social Security. That's the lowest amount of benefits you would get would be age 62. I would think it may be more prudent to do it in a phase-in approach just to see how it will work with the expansion of it. I'm not so sure that you can get everybody on board to drop it from 65 to 55. I think that's too big of a leap. I think that you would maybe be able to get more Republicans to support it if we were to do a phase-in approach, like go from 65 to 62 or maybe even 60. However, the part about the prescription drug, that definitely needs to take place, and I can see that happening. There are a lot of companies. I have a colleague of mine who has a company called the Canadian Drug Store. He's located down in Tampa, Florida. He's able to go and get prescription drugs from places like the UK, Australia, other countries that have English speaking as their main national language, and their FDA, which is their Federal Drug Administration, their guidelines closely assemble the US. And he's able to go out there and get medication that 200 and 300% cheaper than what people here are paying for it. So that's definitely something that needs to be done. Big Pharma spent a lot of money lobbying in DC, and they've been able to somehow keep Medicare out of being able to negotiate like other healthcare carriers have been able to do.
Go ahead.
Just because it's a government-sponsored program, so they're not negotiating. It should be the other way around, that they should be allowed to negotiate. So that would be a lot of cost savings there.
When Medicare and Social Security came into being, I think 65 was old, and not saying 65 still isn't 65, but people are living a lot longer, so it probably cost more money to do it at 65, which I think would certainly be the cry if we tried lowering it and so on and so forth. But I don't know. I probably agree with you that especially on the drug thing. I mean, especially if you're an older man and you need the meds, it's you don't have it the other way around it.
Right.
I got a comment here that says Republicans aren't going to play ball on anything. Those concerned about providing health care to all Americans could just skip trying to please GOPers, GOPERS, whatever. However you say, health care for all is a human right. Probably so. So, Mychal, you got anything else for us? Barbara's not here. You always have a couple of questions, so you got the floor.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. Let's talk about the mask mandate then. I understand that President Biden is supposed to address the nation today sometime, and CDC is coming up with more guidelines saying that you do not have to wear a mask out in public now, or, if you're kind of by yourself. You've seen people riding in cars by themselves with a mask on, or people just walking down the street with a mask on. They're saying you don't have to go to those extremes anymore. And especially if you've been fully vaccinated and you're around other people that's been vaccinated, you don't have to wear the mask. And we're learning that, the protection is coming around. Unfortunately, there is a poll out there that 51% of people that are registered as Republicans have not gotten the vaccine and do not plan on getting the vaccine, a little bit over half. So they are now urging former President Trump to do a PSA to encourage those Republicans to go and get a vaccination, because if we can get 80%, somewhere in that number of our population fully vaccinated, we can create herd immunity and kind of stop this. And so that's an interesting thing. It'll be interesting to find out what the president says about that. But from what I understand, CDC is coming out with new guidelines, and they're also saying that you don't have to worry about the surfaces. You remember when it first came out, you had to wipe all the surfaces down, and people were wiping the cars down and what have you. I recall my brother saying he went out with disinfectant and he was wiping down the steering wheel and his dashboard. And I was saying, well, who's in the car but you? But I just left it alone,
But I think in the beginning, because people were just getting it left and right. So people were going overboard to get it. You know what? And I'm so used to wearing the mask now. So I'll go in the supermarket and have the mask on, and then I'll get my car and be driving home. And I just, it isn't that I think I'm going to get something in the car by myself. I'm just used to having it on. And so I realize I'll get about half home. It's like, oh, okay, I still got my mask on. So maybe that's why some people are still wearing it. I don't know. I just hate that it's become such a divisive issue because I'm thinking it's for everybody's health. So, but some people don't feel that way. So,
Well, it's interesting. And being a former athlete, Tom, you can relate to this. They always talk about muscle memory and stuff with athletes and what have you. And it's amazing, like you're talking about the mask thing. When I go to the gym now, I walk in with a mask on, okay? And I'm looking for the little monitor. It's a digital monitor that you put your face in so they check your temperature. So I went to the gym last week, and when I walked in, it wasn't there. So I'm standing around, I'm looking around, looking for the monitor to put because I want to see what my temperature is anyway, okay? And it's not there. And I'm looking around and other people don't have the mask on. So I walk around to the back, and then there's this one little monitor over there so that you can go and self-check if you want to. Whereas before, they would check your temperature and you hear something coming through the loudspeaker saying normal temperature, okay? Now they don't have that at all. So I asked the lady, I said, well, are you not taking my temperature? Well, you don't really have to take it anymore. And you don't have to wear the mask anymore unless you want to. Like, wow. And then I go upstairs, and we used to have all these sanitizing stations where you pull out the napkin wipes. They hardly full now. They're empty. Or you got to walk around and look for one, And myself, wanting to exercise on the side of caution, I'm going around trying to find stuff to wipe down because I want to kind of stay with the routine that I've built up.
Sure.
But I think most people are pulling way back. And I don't know if you saw this. There was a lady from Georgia that totally got on television and chastised, I think it was in Cobb County, the school board for making the younger kids wear masks. And she absolutely went off. It was viral, and it went on national news where she was saying, you guys know that they're not effective. When are you going to take these masks off of these kids? Covering their nose and their mouths is where they have to breathe. And I mean, it was just totally off the edge. As they say, unhinged. She was unhinged about it.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I guess I don't get it. I still have the little sanitizer thing in my car because I was travel a lot, go up and down the highway and stuff, and I just always wanted to be safe. I think the main thing to me, it wasn't just about me; it was about other people, and if I could in fact infect them or what have you. I go to a massage place. I went to get a massage Sunday, and they check your temperature when you come in. I mean, it doesn't even take 5 seconds, Okay, 98.2, you're good. So I don't know why it upsets people so badly, but we got, I think, a lot of things we can be worried about and deal with. So that's just one of them. So, Mychal, you got anything else? Let me read a couple of the comments here. Hundreds of kids off died. I think that's a typo. Probably hundreds of kids died. Thousands have become ill with an inflammatory disease, etc. Jeff Hedrick. Joyce, I'm always baffled by the fact that we don't consider health care as a part of our national commitment to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Probably agree with that. Those who don't get vaccinated should be banned from inside dining, concerts and sporting events, and unable to buy life insurance and other products. I think Jeff's taking a hard line on.
Well, I can understand. It's been several months, but I did a report and I talked about employers making it mandatory for people to get vaccinated. And I think you're going to see a little bit more of that, even though they're talking about, you're infringing on their freedom. But they've already said that universities and schools are going to mandate that people become vaccinated or students become vaccinated before they come back to school. And some people say, well, I shouldn't have to get vaccinated if I don't want to. But then the flip side is they have to get vaccinated for what, measles or polio and all that other stuff before they go to school. So I'm not really sure why you wouldn't want to get vaccinated for this as well.
And employers, now back when I was a younger man and coming into the workforce, employers could always pretty much demand that you get a physical, that you
Yes.
get a physical from this doctor,
True.
not your doctor, but this
Right.
doctor that's their doctor, and all kinds of things like that. I don't see, and I don't think anybody, I don't remember anybody coming up with that was taking away their right.
Yeah.
And so this is to me, a recent political thing, and that further divides, I guess, is what I like to say. So, Mychal, you got anything else before we go to Bob?
No, that's it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. All righty. Okay. Well, let's go to our best girl message, and we'll come back with our special G-List guest.
Best Girl is a consulting firm that provides customized leadership, access and inclusion, public relations, communications, and organizational consulting services. Clients include Fortune 500 companies, utilities, higher education institutions, small businesses, and associations. Best Girl's team of consultants, led by Joyce Gilly Gossom, Emily Hedrick, and Sean Jones, partners with business and education clients to promote organizational effectiveness, communication, motivation, and leadership, with always an impact on the bottom line. Best Girl's customized consulting services include strategic planning, corporate communication, executive coaching, fundraising, and economic development.
Marvin Carter, good morning to you as well. Marvin Carter says good morning. So the G-List, where everybody is a star. Remember, Hollywood has the A-list, and here on Tuesdays with Tom, we have the G-List. Our G-List today is Mr. Bob Zellner. Now, Bob Zellner's career as a civil rights activist spans nearly 7 decades. A native of Mobile, he graduated from Huntington College in Montgomery, where he became a member of the All-Black Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. After graduating, Zellner was hired by SNCC to recruit white students for the civil rights movement. And until 1962, Zellner was SNCC's only white field secretary. Now, as mentioned earlier in the show, Bob's book, The Wrong Side of Murder Creek, was produced as a major motion picture by Spike Lee and directed by Alabama native Barry Brown. The film was also shot on location in the state of Alabama. So let's get Bob onto the show. Bob, welcome to the show, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to be with you today, and very excited.
Well, we are excited to have you, definitely. So I just want to tell me, first of all, I want to talk about SNCC. And I saw that, well, of course I saw the movie.
You were in the movie.
So I saw it.
Yeah.
But let me say this. How did you get into SNCC? I know how it came about in the film. Is that how it actually happened? That you became a member of SNCC?
Well, some things had to be condensed together. And when you write a movie script from a book, you can't have a 10-hour movie. So you have to condense it down. But it's very true that I was directed into SNCC by some of my elder mentors, including Mrs. Rosa Parks and Dr. Martin Luther King, while I was still a college student in Montgomery. And we were having some difficulty in having the right to actually do our scholarship that we needed to do while we were in college, because when 5 of us went to interview Dr. King and Mrs. Rosa Parks and Brother E.D. Nixon of the NAACP, we were asked to resign from school because we had broken the civil rights laws. So the first reason that I got involved with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, was to get my own rights, because I was not allowed to even go and sit down with Dr. King or Mrs. Parks or Brother Nixon, because it would be violating the segregation laws.
Wow.
And we were actually fighting for our own civil liberties by getting involved with SNCC. So that's the true story.
Okay. So when you wrote your book, and I have people all the time telling me, I got this wonderful book, I'd like to see it made into a movie and blah, 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 blah. Can you describe that process of your book becoming a movie?
Yes, I can describe that, because actually the first script of the movie was completed in, I think it's dated 1987.
Oh, wow.
And the book wasn't published until 2008. So the movie really comes from stories that Barry Brown and I shared when we first met in New York City. And I began to tell him about growing up in LA, in Lower Alabama. And he was also an Alabama boy. So we began to swap stories. And of course, Barry being in movies, he said, I think there might be a movie in this. And that's the way it started. So it started just by storytelling with each other. And then it became a script. And then I decided I better really buckle down and write the book before this movie came out. So we were able to get the book published in 2008, and the movie came out in 2019.
Yeah. Or it was filmed in 2019.
It was filmed in 2019 and just been completed, and it's now available.
Well, and filmed, I must say, on location in the state of Alabama, which doesn't get, a ton of movies shot there. So that was a good thing for the state of Alabama. Go ahead.
Yes, it's very much an Alabama movie, and it's been supported by the Alabama government, and Alabama has a commitment now to preserving the history of the civil rights movement. And the Alabama is cooperating very well with the National Park Service, and EJI has made a tremendous contribution to businesses and
Equal Justice Initiative.
And it's been good for business in Alabama to embrace movies and museums and preserving this history, because so much of the civil rights movement occurred in Mississippi and Alabama, and they're preserving that and passing it on to young people. It's becoming part of our education now, as it was not when we were educated as children.
That's interesting, and that was going to be the next thing I was going to ask you. Having been involved, I guess, in civil rights from an athletic perspective, and going to talk to students now, what reception you get from the young people, and are they aware of your story and similar stories?
Yes, they are aware, and I spend as much time as possible speaking to first, second, and third graders all over the country. And it's always exciting to me to get feedback from the children. And they love the stories, and they love the civil rights movement, because children are naturally Democrats with a small d. And they know what's fair and what's not fair, and they relate personally to the civil rights stories. And I'll tell you one quick one. I spoke to a third grade class up in Harwichport, Massachusetts, and it was part of an educational series by Harvard University. And after I spoke to the class, we talked about the Montgomery bus boycott and Mrs. Rosa Parks and Dr. King. And I told them I was in jail with Dr. Martin Luther King, and that Mrs. Rosa Parks was one of my mentors. And part of the class exercise afterwards was all of the children were supposed to write letters to the speaker, and I was the speaker. So one little boy wrote to me and he said, "Oh, Mr. Bob, I was so excited that you met Martin Luther King and Mrs. Rosa Parks. Do you mind if I ask if you met Harriet Tubman?" And I said, well, I wrote back and sent it to the teacher. And I said, be sure to tell John that I didn't meet Harriet Tubman, but we were in the same movement. She was just there much earlier than I was.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's pretty cool. I do find it interesting that the children are interested, and I also find it interesting when parents object to it, and for whatever reason, they object. I want to ask you one more thing, and then we're going to go to Mychal. How did you recruit whites to SNCC? SNCC had more of a, quote, reputation for, Dr. King was nonviolent. SNCC had a different reputation, whether warranted or not. And we were involved in legal segregation. So how did you go about recruiting them?
Well, one thing that I did was I had mentors who had been in the movement for a long time, like Ann Braden of Southern Conference Education Fund, and she had worked with Ms. Ella Baker, who also had contacts all over the South. So most of the times when I would go to a new town, I would go to, sometimes I would start with the historically Black college or university that was in that town. And sometimes they would know people on the other campus who maybe they had met at a meeting or something that they knew that they were interested in the movement. So I would go to a campus sometimes with one or two contacts. And then those students generally knew other students who felt the same way they did. And you just built on contact after contact after contact. And most of the white students were intrigued by the movement the same way I was as a young person when I saw young people, Black sisters and brothers, my same age, going to the lunch counters and sitting in. And they were defying authority. And that was very exciting for young people, especially we were coming out of what they call the silent generation, and we were not going to be silent. And certainly we were not going to support the segregation institution. And so rebellion was in the air, revolution was in the air. And many of those students on white campuses were interested to know what's happening. And I was, being a field secretary of SNCC, I was right in the middle of a lot of things, so I could tell them what's happening and give them an idea of that. Number one, they can become a part of the movement and not be killed right away. So I had a lot of different lessons, and there was a good response from the white campuses, and it developed into a lot of things later on.
Okay, let's go to Mychal and see if he's got. He's got some questions for you, Mychal.
Good morning, Bob. Glad you're here with us.
Hi, Mychal. How are you?
I am doing well, thank you. The first question I want to ask you is, how did your father and grandfather justify being Methodist ministers and members of the KKK at the same time?
Well, that's a wonderful question. And the answer is that my father was not able to justify that. And he had some experiences that caused him to what Daddy described as wrestling with the angel. He was wrestling with that question because he had been a Klan organizer. His father and all of his brothers and sisters were a Klan family from Birmingham, Alabama, a vicious part of the Ku Klux Klan. And when he became a minister of the gospel, he was reading the Bible and he couldn't justify the two things. And he had to make a decision. And he eventually broke with the Ku Klux Klan. And when he did, his mother and father disowned him, and his own brothers never spoke to him again in his entire life.
Wow.
So that was what I grew up with as a small child. I was involved in the movement long before I even understood what a movement was.
Wow.
Hmm.
That's incredible.
Yes, yes, it is. Tell me about the $85 bad check you wrote and got arrested for.
Well,
Everybody starts laughing.
yeah.
Well, the reason why I'm laughing is I can relate to it, but I just want him to expound upon it.
Go ahead.
Well, it wasn't funny at the time because they tried to put me in prison for 10 years.
Wow.
But when I got involved with 4 other students from Huntington College, and we met Dr. King and Ms. Rosa Parks at Reverend Abernathy's church in Montgomery, we were asked to resign from college. We were being dismissed because we had broken the segregation laws. And it was amazing because my Christian college, my Methodist college in Montgomery, Alabama, had a policy that if a student participated in a civil rights demonstration, they were to be terminated as students and banned from the campus for life.
Wow.
So after that happened to me as an undergraduate at Huntington, I was banned from the campus, and I was told that if I went back to Huntington, I'd be arrested. Well, one of the first times I went back to Huntington, because I wasn't going to pay attention to something that I didn't agree with, it was my responsibility to go and talk to my fellow Methodist students at Huntington about what's happening in the civil rights movement. And when I did that, I was arrested by Al Lingo, who was a Klansman who had been appointed by George Wallace to be head of the Alabama Highway Patrol. And I was arrested on campus. And then what they did in those days, they would arrest you and then they would decide what can we charge him with? He hasn't done anything, but they would just find something. And I had tried to get rid of my wallet when they arrested me. And there were some students right outside the door of the patrol car when they loaded me in and started taking me off to jail. I tossed my wallet out because I had names and addresses of people in my wallet. And if they turned up, they could be harassed by the police or followed by the Alabama Sovereignty Commission. But anyway, one of the deans of the college found my wallet on the grass there, and they took it to the police. And I had just bought a camera and paid for it with an $85 check. And I think it was on a Friday. And my account in Atlanta was a little bit short of $85, but my weekly check had not been deposited yet. And so they took that check and they never deposited the check. They just called the bank and they said, could we check on the amount of money that Bob Zellner has in his account? And it was a little short of $85. And they charged me with false pretenses and intended to try me in Montgomery and send me to jail for 10 years for false pretenses. So that was what that was based on.
Man,
And we had a trial in Montgomery, and lo and behold, I got a hung jury. And
wow.
I had a lawyer from Montgomery named Chuck Morgan. He was
knew him, brother. I know.
Yeah.
I saw his son the other night. I went to the restaurant. Yes.
Yeah, his son has restaurants in Northwest Florida and Mobile, and the son is carrying on the work of the father. But Chuck Morgan was a very courageous young businessman in Birmingham, who spoke out when the little girls were killed in the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. And so Chuck Morgan was very instrumental in organizing a lot of Methodist preachers to come to the trial. And we got a hung jury, and then a case was appealed and so forth. And we usually won those cases once they got out of Alabama into the federal courts, because it was obvious that they were using the laws to arrest civil rights workers whenever they wanted to. And so eventually I was charged with everything from criminal anarchy to, once in Virginia, I was charged under the John Brown statute. And that was the same law that John Brown was hanged for. And they accused me of inciting war and violence against the white population. So I was charged with the same crime that John Brown was charged with.
So when Mychal mentioned the $85 check, we laughed, but obviously there's nothing funny about what went on there. That was incredible. I got a couple of comments for you. Sturfon Deming, who was on last week, says, I am enjoying this program with my 10-year-old as part of his homeschooling work for today. Thank you. And Joyce, my wife, says, hi, Mr. Zellner. Were your family members supportive of your decisions? And if not, how and from whom did you get support for your courageous actions?
Well, the first part of the answer is that, yes, my family did support me. And in fact, my mother had said during the time I was at Huntington, she said, Bob, I've only wanted you to do 3 things when you're in college. I wanted you to take typing, which I did. And she didn't even know about computers now. So it's good. I do a lot of writing. So I'm glad that I know how to type. And she said, take speech class because you have a very bad Southern accent. It sounded like I climbed out from under a rock in lower Alabama. And she said, and finish your undergraduate degree. Please graduate. I said, well, it's not up to me. I'm not going to leave. I'm staying here. And I did graduate, and I did take typing, and I took speech lessons. So I did what my mother had said, and mother and dad and my 4 brothers all supported me. And I didn't know until I started researching and writing the book, The Wrong Side of Murder Creek. I had no idea what they had all gone through because I was in the newspapers all the time. Yeah. Being a white boy from lower Alabama named Zellner, everybody knew everything I did. So every time I was arrested, it was in Montgomery Advertiser, Birmingham News, Mobile Register. It was all over. And so, you know, the name wasn't Smith or Jones, it was Zellner. So my brothers were always asked, are you any kin to that Bob Zellner? And they would say, yes, he's my brother and we're proud of him.
Good.
So
that's great.
Yeah, I have a lot of support from my family.
Okay, let's see. We got a couple of other comments and then we'll go back to Mychal. Jeff Hedrick says, I'm proud of and thankful for great Americans like Mr. Zellner. I wondered if he had met Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner.
Yes. Well, I knew Schwerner, and I met Goodman also. And I know Cheney's family very well, but I had not met Cheney at the time that they were lynched in Mississippi. But we've all become very close since that time, because it was a major event in the civil rights struggle, and it was bittersweet because a lot of my Black sisters and brothers in SNCC were anguished that so many people had already been lynched and murdered, and because there were two white young men killed in this incident, that it became a worldwide sensation. So yes, I knew them, and we go every year. We travel with students from Seattle area in Project Pilgrimage, and we always go to Philadelphia, Mississippi, and we go to the spot where Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman were killed. And we go through that whole story, and it just rips my heart out every time we go, because I know that in all of their nonviolent training, they knew that that situation may develop where they had to give up their lives, or their lives were taken from them because of what they were doing. And the stories of their last hours on earth is one of the most heartrending. And it reminds a lot of people of the Emmett Till story, because most young people my age, especially young Black brothers and sisters, that was a life-changing experience for them when Emmett Till was murdered in Tallahatchie County in Mississippi. And it was very terrifying for young people, especially because when you're a child, you think your parents are all powerful and they can always protect you, that adults will always take care of you. And when Emmett Till was taken out and brutally murdered and thrown in the river with a cotton gin fan around his neck, young people all over the South were terrified. How can adult people do that to a child? And it was a tremendous lesson to lots of people who got involved in the civil rights movement. And Ms. Rosa Parks said when she was sitting on the bus and she was told to move, she decided she was not going to move. And she said, I thought of Emmett Till.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, let me ask you this. And I remember the night when Dr. King was killed, and I had to take two buses to get home from school, and I would get home from football practice, and it would be like school would get out at 3:00, and I'd get home like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And I just remember how when it was announced he had been killed, I remember how scared I was. I mean, nobody bothered me, but it was just the times and the culture of that time. Were you ever fearful for your life?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yes. But there was we were so well disciplined and so well trained in the nonviolent workshops. And we had decided, most of the young people in SNCC had decided that we are going to go to the roughest, most dangerous places. And we also knew that if we were going to do that, and we were determined we were going to do that, that if we had to forfeit our lives, we would. And so what I discovered was that all during the early part of my SNCC experience, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, whenever it looked like I was definitely going to be killed, and that happened actually at my first demonstration in Macomb, Mississippi in October of 1961, when Herbert Lee had been killed, the part that you played in the movie. And we had a demonstration in Macomb, Mississippi. And I was taken out of the town hall in Macomb, Mississippi by a whole bunch of ununiformed people in cars and pickup trucks and taken out to a tree with a hangman's rope.
Wow.
And they said, we're going to hang you with this rope from that limb. And I really thought that I only had a few minutes to live. And I was at complete peace. Complete peace.
Man, thank you. I appreciate you recounting this for us. I know it's tough. It's painful. Mychal, you got anything else you want to ask Bob?
Yes, I do. First, though, before I say that, I want to say I commend you for your mental toughness and emotional stability, for being able to go through what you've been through and to be able to sit here and recant now. So my hat's off to you for that. It takes a lot of intestinal fortitude to do that. You may, I thought you were about to recant what my next question was, where you encountered some people that tried to pull your eyeballs out.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that? Was that the same time, or was that a different situation?
No, that was that was the same situation. And one of the reasons that the eyeball story has become so famous is that whenever I talk to students, and I do all over the United States and all over the world sometimes, I tell them about my first demonstration, and I recount it as closely as I can to the way it actually happened, in order to give them a feeling of exactly what it felt like to be in the hands of a lynch mob, or people who want to blind you because of something that you believe, some belief that you have in your heart. And that's what happened to me on the steps of the city hall in Macomb, Mississippi. When Herbert Lee was murdered, Jim Foreman and the leadership of SNCC said, okay, we all got to go to Macomb, Mississippi, because SNCC had a policy that we didn't have our meetings necessarily in Atlanta or Nashville or New Orleans, some relatively safe place. If we had people who were losing their lives or being brutalized because they were trying to register to vote, that's where we went for our meetings. And we had a meeting in Macomb on October the 4th, after Herbert Lee was murdered in September, I think. And while we were in the meeting, 135 students from the Berglund High School, led by Brenda Travis, who was about 16 years old.
Wow.
It was the first high school student-led civil rights march in Mississippi in 100 years. There hadn't been a march like that since Reconstruction, right after the Civil War. And I had just been hired to do campus traveling and recruit white students. And I had to make a decision do I go on this? They're going to now march down to the city hall in Macomb, Mississippi. And I had to make a decision. Do I stay back here or do I go on the march? And I had a discussion with myself and I said, well, I can't go on the march. I'll never get on a white campus if I go on the march and get arrested. And I said, Mother will lose her teaching job. She was a school teacher in Alabama. And I said, my dad will lose his church and there will be more violence than usual. And then I began to realize I'm talking to myself because nobody's telling me to go on the march or not go on the march. And that's how I learned about SNCC. When something was dangerous, as that was going to be, nobody would say, you need to go on the march. Every person had to make their own decision. And when they started on the march, I finally decided, well, what's going to happen to these young people? What's going to happen to these high school students? What's going to happen to their parents and their jobs? And then I realized if I was going to be a part of SNCC, I was going to have to be a part of SNCC. So I just joined the line of march and went down with them to the city hall. And when we got there, there were 400 or 500 people in the middle of the street blocking the march. And they had every weapon you could conceive of. They had pipes, they had chains.
Wow.
Several people had hangman's nooses. Across the top of the city hall were white men dangling hangman nooses over the edge of the roof. And a little group of people gathered around me and they began to hit me. They would hit me and then they would look at the police like, you know, what should we do? And the police were saying in every way they possibly could without speaking the words, get him and get him good. So they were turning me over to the mob. And that's when Chuck McDew and Bob Moses, both black staff members of SNCC, they came over in the nonviolent fashion and stood between me and the mob that was beginning to beat me. And the police were so enraged that the police came over then with big, long billy sticks. And for the first time in my life, I saw somebody hit in the head as hard as you could hit this table with a baseball bat. Just and see the scalp split and the white of a skull showing through, and then a slow trickle of blood, not a splash of blood like we see in the movies, but a slow trickle of blood. And you could see the swelling. You could literally see the swelling come on their head. And I began to think, if they do this to us in public, what are they going to do when they get us in their jail? And they beat Bob Moses and Chuck McDew and dragged them off and left me with the mob. And the big mob in the street kept screaming, bring him here, we'll kill him, bring him here. So they picked me up and started carrying me out into this big mob. And I realized that if they got me out there, there's no force on earth that's going to keep me alive. They're going to beat me to death. So then I heard my father's voice in his preacher's voice, and it said, God helps those who help themselves. And so I decided I would take a hold of the rail that was down the steps of the city hall. And when I grabbed a hold of that rail, you never heard such screaming in your life. Oh, he's resisting, he's resisting. And then they really began to try to pull me loose from that rail. And when they pulled, I would hold on. And when they came back to get another pull, I would actually move up the rail. And they got so frustrated that they couldn't, 12 or 13 men, they ripped my clothes practically off and they couldn't get me loose from that rail. And somebody in absolute frustration came over the back of my head and started putting their fingers in my left eye socket. And then I realized that they're trying to get my eyeball between their thumb and forefinger, and they intend to pull my eyeball out of my head. They're going to blind me. And you know, I had martial arts training when I was in college. I was a martial arts instructor. So I would wait until he just about got my eyeball in his grip, and I would move my head in such a way that my eyeball would actually thunk back into my eye socket. And eventually I worked my way all the way to the top of the steps. And then they got so frustrated, they all climbed on top of me and finally broke me loose from the rail. And the last thing I remember is my head was sticking out of the pile, and there was a big brown boot kicking me in the temple. And I realized that they were trying to kick my brains out. And before I lost consciousness, the last thought that I had was, this is the way that I die, because I thought they were going to kill me right there. And but I survived. So, but that's the story that I tell about them trying to pull my eyeball out, because white Southerners were supposed to stay in line. We were not supposed to dissent from segregation and racism. And if you were white, and especially if you were a white Southerner, they thought that they had to absolutely stop you from doing that, because it might encourage other people to oppose segregation and begin to change this racist history that we've all been saddled with.
Wow, Bob, that's incredible. Man, I just want to thank you so much for being here with us, and for not only what you went through, but for being able to share it. I know it's tough to share. And I want to say one thing. You keep mentioning Herbert Lee. Herbert Lee was a character that I got to play in Son of the South. And Barry, the director, asked me if I'd do it, and it was great. It's always tough to play people who actually lived the experience and paid for it with their lives, and he was one of the ones who paid for it with his life. Bob, is there anything you'd like to say in closing? It's been phenomenal, more so than I could have imagined. But would you like to? Do you have anything in closing you'd like to say?
I do. Yes, thank you. And that is that Pamela and I work with a lot of young people now, high school students out in Seattle and other places around the country, and they are developing a curriculum now for schools. And so the curriculum of the civil rights movement is getting into schools. And one of the things and there's also a college group
Action Academy.
called Action Academy. So we work with young people in high schools and in college, and it's leadership training. And these students are going to be leaders in the progressive movement, humanitarian leaders for the next century. And
tell them about the Billy Fields Morgan Project, which is going to put the civil rights into Alabama schools.
Yes, Billy Field, who is a film instructor and teaches screenwriting and movie skills at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, is doing a project now for Alabama schools
called the Morgan Project.
For training young people to enter the movie and TV industries.
No, it's teaching them about the civil rights movement.
And teaching them about the civil rights movement. Pamela is helping me over here.
That's okay. And she can move into the camera if she wants to. That's
Yep.
great.
But what you gave me an opportunity to say a closing remark, and that is that the students are taking up a humanitarian cause now that touches a lot of people, and that's the situation in Rwanda. There was a movie made called Hotel Rwanda about Paul Rusesabagina, who was the proprietor of the hotel in Rwanda and saved many. He was a Hutu, and he saved many Tutsi lives. So he's a humanitarian, and he's now been kidnapped and taken back to Rwanda by the dictator of Rwanda, and they intend to execute him or kill him. And the United States is one of the biggest financial supporters of Rwanda. And the young people have gotten 37 or more congressmen and senators to make a statement saying that the United States is paying special attention to what's happening to Paul Rusesabagina while he's in prison, and that we insist that he be given his rights to a lawyer and to see a doctor. He has physical health problems and so forth. He's not being allowed any of that. So the young people have launched a program to get a lot of attention to Rwanda and the fate of Paul Rusesabagina. So I wanted to say that to your audience, and to get in touch with your congressman or your senator and tell them to get in touch with the authorities in Rwanda, that we insist on having humanitarian treatment for Paul Rusesabagina. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Before I close, Mychal, you got a final thing you'd like to say?
No, I don't. I just appreciate you gracing us with your presence today and sharing your life stories with us. We can all learn from your courageousness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara Wallace Edwards is she's from Mobile. She's one of our permanent roundtable guests, and she had some internet issues today. But she did send a message. She said, "I was so looking forward to today's show. I want to thank Mr. Zellner for all of his work and sacrifices for the civil rights movement. I was brought to tears as I listened to him share stories regarding his experiences and sufferings as part of the movement via video. I would love to have an opportunity to meet him in person one day."
We will.
There you go. Let's see. And I got one more comment here. Somebody's watching Son of the South right now. And so anyway, I just want to say thank you, man. It's been an incredible morning, and I will watch you tomorrow at University of South Alabama. Let me just say that again for everybody. It's at 3:00. It's at the McQueen Alumni Center at the University of South Alabama. If you'd like to see Mr. Zellner in person or watch him via video. And your better half is on here now. How are you doing?
Good, very good.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing, Bob, with us.
My pleasure.
It's been a wonderful morning.
Get the Zoom on the program tomorrow from USA.
Oh, yes. Tomorrow, Bob is doing a program at the University of South Alabama. I don't know if you're familiar, but they've had a scandal there where one of the deans had posted horrible pictures. It was on Facebook for years before anybody noticed it, but himself in a Confederate uniform and some other woman with a noose and just terrible things. And so that has all come to light, and the students are in an uproar. And we're going to be talking about how do we talk to each other about these very uncomfortable topics. And I can send you a link if you like to that program.
We would certainly put it up. That would be great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If you'll get it to us. And I think you guys have Emily's information
Yes.
or mine, either one. That would be great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I have one final comment from Jose Garcia, my good friend. He said, I've always wondered about the offspring of white people whom were actively involved in committing crimes on blacks, what their story would be today if they were to speak out. That would be an interesting piece.
Right. Yeah, what your
Perhaps.
daughters would say. Yeah.
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 Mm.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else? Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
We're going to wrap up and. Okay, we've run over on our time a little bit, so we'll skip right to the end and say we appreciate Mr. Zellner and his wife, and it was just absolutely wonderful, and appreciate all the comments in the chat. And Barbara, I hope you're getting a chance to watch us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. So that's our show for today. Thank you for watching. Thank the audience. I want to thank Mychal, Barbara, thank Bob Zellner. Our upcoming guest next week is Gerald Jenwright, who's a financial advisor. All of you close enough to retire or young and thoughtful enough to put money aside for a short-term rainy day fund, buy your first house, pay off your mortgage, pay off your school loans or retirement. We'll discuss all that and more next week with Gerald Jenwright of Mainstream Financial Group. I want to thank our sponsor, Best Girl. If you're interested in having your business to be a sponsor of the show, get in touch with us at tom@bestgirl.com. I want to thank Emily Hedrick, the communicator, our producer. Thanks, Sean Jones, the organizer. Remember to enjoy yourself. Make every day count. Stay safe and peace.